What up, everybody? I am Brett Pape. Unfortunately, Coach Bruce is on the road today, so we kind of got a different little show. But needless to say, here we go.
What up?
Coach Bruce, here we are, and this is the Coach Approach.
Stay on.
Coach, what is up? Finally,
What's going on, man?
I always kind of envisioned that we'd finally meet someday, but I never thought that it would take place in my bedroom and we'd be hanging out here for an hour. But here we are. Coach Bruce, it's great to see you, man.
Hey, it's good to see you. Nothing like showing an intro to a podcast about two of us being in his bedroom. That's how we do it here at Coach Approach.
So what brings you out here? Again, it's that old job that brings you out here, right?
Yeah, business trip. Came out to see some customers out here in Southern Cal, and Brett was nice enough to invite me into his home, and so here we are doing the podcast from the Pape residence. Couldn't be happier, man.
Southern California. I didn't realize how much you've spent a lot of time. I thought you kind of were just out here playing football in college, but I didn't realize you had yourself a nice little early life career. So you've been a SoCal boy a little bit.
Yeah, born and raised in Arizona, but spent about 3 years in Southern Cal in the Huntington Beach area in a previous job many years ago. And then, of course, played college ball out here too. So loved coming out through Southern Cal and rolling off the 10 and doing some strolling down memory lane, so to speak.
Well, you never were up this far north, were you?
No, as far north as I've gotten.
Yeah, this kind of explains all the internet issues I have.
Yeah.
We're literally out in the middle of nowhere. But we digress. Why don't we get right into it? So last week, prior to week 7 games, we discussed a few things. And obviously all the buys were an issue. And if you were lucky enough to pull off some victories last week, be thankful. And it's nice to see this week we only got 2 buys.
Yes, which is a lot easier than last week. It seemed like every team that had a great, was fantasy relevant. You had the Chargers, you had the Bills, you had the Cowboys, you had all these teams that have great. What do we call it? The bipocalypse, I think is a term that kept getting thrown, or Bimageddon, or whatever it was that we called it. But it's nice to go into this week and feel like you've got all your players back. Where last week it was if you weren't planning 2 weeks ahead, you were definitely in a tough situation putting lineups together last week.
Well, for me, when you have 37 teams, it's tough to plan a week ahead, and you might have been able to do that. But I wasn't, and it was a rough week, and so I'm thankful. And you know what? I saw a tweet. I'm not on Twitter as much as I used to be, but I saw a tweet last week, and it kind of made me giggle. And that was somebody saying it's felt like all year long with injuries that we've been dealing with bye weeks, because it's been a brutal year. And I'm sure if you're like me, you have a lot of guys that haven't even seen the field yet.
No, I shared a lineup on Twitter, just this last week, and it was showing Cam Akers, and I had Michael Thomas, and I had J.K. Dobbins, and I can't remember, 7 or 8 players that are on the George Kittle was another one, and that's an IDP league too, so some defensive guys as well. But it was just a mash unit and trying to put together a lineup. So the joke was, hey, that team was 0-6 heading into last week because I'm struggling to put a lineup together. But it is. It's almost like you're in a bye week every week with the amount of injuries we've had this year and compared to years past, for sure.
One of the things that we always talk about on here is how we're not analysts. And I only bring that up because being in the community with other analysts, I wouldn't say that we feel obligated, but when we are asked to be in a league, or, hey, man, we have an opportunity for you to be in this league, we want to jump at it because it is a great opportunity to kind of test your skills against the best. But here we are now going into week 8. And I don't know about you, but, man, if there was any other way to abort a few of these leagues, and not because of record, but just because the limit is certainly a lot lower than 37 for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. I last year had 37, which is ironically that was the same number I had last season. I said in the offseason, I'm going to cut this down to 12. I'll give a couple of home leagues that guys have kind of disappeared from. We're struggling to find new people to fill spots. And then, you get the more Twitter presence you get, the more analysts you meet, you become friends with. I met a bunch of people at the expo. So next thing you know, you get back and you have all these analysts asking you to be in leagues with them. So of the draft process was hard for me to say no. So I'm from 37 back down to 12. Now I'm back up to, I think that's 34 teams again this year. So I'm still haven't quite mastered how to cut back. So you can imagine Sunday morning, and then of course Thursday before the Thursday night game, trying to figure out who's questionable, some of the game time decisions. Like last week, I had Darren Waller and a bunch of teams, and I was smart enough to take him out. But in the Scott Fish Bowl, I picked up Morrow, and I forgot to put him in the lineup after I picked him. Realizing I got him on waivers. I was lucky enough to pull out the Scott Fish Bowl. But it's hard to have that many teams to figure out who you have rostered where. I feel like, and I'm going to say this because we got a little presence here, it'd be nice if Sleeper, like you could just type in a player's name like Darren Waller, and it automatically pulls up all 19 teams you have him on. So you can just change those lineups instead of going through all 34 and trying to figure out which ones you've got him on to adjust your lineups.
Yeah, I ran into that last week. I played somebody in a league where I was actually 5-1, and I played a running back in last Thursday night's game, Kareem Hunt, because of all the leagues, that was the one league where I forgot to take Kareem Hunt out of the lineup. And I hate it for a couple reasons. Obviously, I hate it because it led to a defeat.
Yeah.
But secondly, I feel like in the space that we're in, we of all people should be active and should know what the hell's going on. So it was a tough pill for me to have to swallow.
Yeah, it's tough. I was lucky enough to get Dearness Johnson in a couple leagues, but I've done the same thing. Like we talked about with Foster Morrow and with Darren Waller's situation. Now you talk about Kareem Hunt. Now you got Nick Chubb coming back, and so for me that picked up Dearness Johnson 2 weeks ago, I was ahead of the curve, got lucky there, and was able to play him. And now you're like, okay, Nick Chubb's back. What does that mean for that backfield? So now you got to kind of figure that out and what you're going to do with that lineup. But I still think Dearness Johnson has some fantasy relevance based on his performance last week. But yeah, it's fun now going into week 8 with only 2 teams on bye. It's a little bit easier to steer your path this week.
I love guys like Dearness Johnson.
Yeah.
We go crazy about it. And I didn't – this year it wasn't like it was last year. Do you remember how much people were spending in fab money for Dearness Johnson last year? And I kind of – when we were looking at the running back situation last week, I didn't get into it because I didn't have the money or I didn't have the resources in the Scott Fish Bowl where I could really utilize him. I didn't have enough to actually get him because you knew it was expensive. But that guy's been 2 years in a row where he's proven when he can produce.
I think that's a neat thing about that backfield. And you can say the same thing about Dallas with Tony Pollard and Zeke is how many years is that team going to have both of those backs? At some point, Kareem Hunt's probably going to get another opportunity to be an RB1. Dearness Johnson, now you have to talk about getting a rookie contract is one thing. Getting that second contract, he's now put himself, based on last week's performance, being the RB1 in that backfield and seeing what he did with over 140 yards and being a part of the passing game as well in a couple situations. He's now, I think, earned his keep in the NFL as not just an RB3 on a team that's deep with a great offensive line, but an opportunity to be an RB2, potentially an RB1 with the right fit and the right scheme. So those games are big for guys like that are trying to find a path. And there's a lot of being not just fantasy relevance, but this is his livelihood. Now he's got an opportunity to stick in the NFL, I think, for years to come in the right situation. So it'll be interesting to see how that backfield plays out.
Well, but like you said, he is now pretty much guaranteed himself a job for the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
By proving that just given the opportunity, and I don't watch. If I were an analyst, I would be a film guy. But I don't sit here and watch a lot of film. I watch what my family time allows me to watch.
Yeah.
And so I say that in the sense that I don't know if he's playing a lot of special teams, but if he is playing a lot of special teams, which if you're an RB3 for a team like Cleveland, you got to think he's playing special teams. So if he is providing a team with special teams capabilities and can come off the bench, he looked explosive last week. I don't think, there wasn't that's a great offensive line with Cleveland, but he was explosive and he looked all bit able to come in and produce for any team.
Well, we're both film guys, right? I mean, we get analytics. We love analytics. We obviously look at that stuff, but I'm a film guy too. I think that's just the coaching background that we have. But I think when you watched Ernest Johnson last week, what stuck out was his ability to read blocks and be a patient runner. You saw several times he would dip inside to set up a block to then bounce it back outside. He did that multiple times, and that's that ability to stretch and make defenses play you horizontally. I thought he did a great job last week. So it wasn't just about the offensive line and him getting 3 or 4 yards before the first contact. There were plays where he looked like he was stuck, and he was able to set up his blocks and get it, it looked like a 2 to 3 yard loss into a 4 to 5 yard gain. So I thought he played a great game last week.
As a high school football coach who struggled at the varsity level as a head coach, one of the things that I was always looking for was a playmaker.
Yeah.
Somebody, when whatever the reason, whether it be bad execution up front or just guys on the other side of the field would outman you, it was always nice to find people who can make plays out of nothing. And he showed a little bit of that last night.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's
not last night, last week.
Yeah, and I came from being an offensive coordinator at the high school level too, and that is what you look for. But you also look for bubbles of space in the run game and what that front seven is looking like and what's the secondary doing, so your quarterback can be put in a good position. So yeah, the play calling is such a big thing, and we talk about that with Daniel Jones. We talk about that with Jalen Hurts, and you could talk about that with what's going on in Chicago, Matt Nagy and Justin Fields, and people not understanding that, yes, talent means a ton, but a coach or an offensive coordinator that can scheme an offense around the talent, like you're seeing that in Philly right now. Jalen Hurts is scoring, he's second in the NFL in terms of fantasy points per game, but 43% of those points are coming in the fourth quarter, which you can call garbage time whenever you want, but he's fantasy relevant. So he's a guy you want to put in your lineup every week. But you look at it from a real football perspective, it's almost like you got to look at, what is he doing as a passer in the NFL and what is that offense doing to put him in successful situations. And I feel like what they're trying to do with Jalen Hurts is not what fits his strengths, if that makes sense.
I just don't think it's a very good football team right now.
It's not.
And so with that being said, you look at what are their options? Is Gardner Minshew really someone who's going to lead them to victory? I don't think so personally. So then we move on to the second part. The second part is they need to just continue to kind of go through why all of a sudden this knee-jerk reaction place that we live in, do NFL teams seem to think, or NFL fan bases think that teams can turn the tables so quickly. And I say that because everybody wants to be fixed right away. And that's, you got to let everything develop. So if they go to Gardner Minshew, what are they doing here? They got rid of some guy they took at the number 2 overall pick. Now they pretty much writing off a guy they picked in the second round. I don't think that that's very good for them. And I'm not just saying that because in every redraft league, I wasn't high on Jalen for dynasty, but redraft, man, his rushing capabilities, that guy, and that's why he's the number 2 scorer, is because he finds a way every week to produce some sort of numbers that make you go, I don't care what the score is. I got some good production out of this guy this week.
That's what's so frustrating, looking at it from fantasy football versus real football perspective. You can talk about Tua, who didn't play a full season last season, what happened there in Miami at the injury and Fitzpatrick. And then you look at Jalen Hurts, we're talking about now, Justin Fields, Zach Wilson. You've got these quarterbacks, like, we're so quick after 4 or 5 starts to say, yeah, he doesn't have what it takes. It's time to move on. It's like, man, you got to give these guys – if you go back and look at Peyton Manning's rookie season, he was 1-15, led the NFL in interceptions, and we saw the career that he had. Not that I'm saying Jalen Hurts was comparable as a prospect to Peyton Manning, but we've got to be more patient and take a look at the actual tape and the film and look at what is the offensive coordinator doing, what is he calling, what is the defensive look, what is he giving you, what is he doing pre-snap versus post-snap, and really be able to take a look at that offense and say, does the scheme fit his strengths? I know it sounds funny to be a couple guys sitting in Brett's room doing a podcast questioning what NFL offensive coordinators do, but that's what you do. I mean, I think you got to give it time, these guys, to make the jump. When you come from Alabama, again, Tua and Jalen Hurts, and and you come from an Oklahoma Lincoln Riley offense, like give these guys time to develop at the pro level before we start, throwing stones at them, man. Like, let's give these guys an opportunity to be successful.
I saw a tweet last week, and I'm not sure who it was from, and I guess it's really not that important, but it was about Trey Lance.
Yeah.
And it was about the guys had one start. He got hurt in the start. And here we go, San Francisco 49ers. You invested all this draft capital to get him, and you've got a bust. Is this serious? Yeah. I mean, it's ridiculous to think that we should throw in the towel on any of them. And I was apprehensive about throwing the towel in on Sam Darnold.
Yeah.
But now we've got something with Sam Darnold. We've got 3 years in a terrible system, or 4 years. How many years was it? Who knows?
Yeah.
And now we've got him struggling the last few weeks with a guy who's supposed to know what he's doing, Matt Rule, and better system than what they had in the Jets, and he's struggling again. So any pause to go after him, I get. But can we give the other guys an opportunity to show it over a long period of time before we throw the towel in on them?
Yeah, you bringing up Carolina is such a great point too, because it's Sam Darnold going from Adam Gase, and you can talk about Tannehill at Adam Gase, you can talk about the Gase, whatever you want to talk about. But what's interesting with that whole scenario is that Sam Darnold was 3-0 with Christian McCaffrey. We know what impact Christian McCaffrey can make both in the run game and in the passing game, and defense is having to account for him. And you're seeing once again, Teddy Bridgewater last year, now Sam Darnold this year, what that difference Christian McCaffrey makes. And you look at Robbie Anderson, he didn't play well with Sam Darnold in New York. He only averaged about 700 yards a season. Now here's Sam Darnold in Carolina, and you're starting to see the same thing. There's a drop-off with Robbie Anderson. Terrace Marshall's not given the return on investment we thought he would when he was going to be the wide receiver 3 there. And so you're really starting to see a struggle with Sam Darnold in that offense. So Sam Darnold is fair to say, hey, we've got a few years with the Jets. We've got now a year, 7 games into Carolina. Hey, there's a trend there with Sam Darnold now. You can say there's enough games there to make more of an educated decision based on what the film tells you and what you're seeing in the eye test, what the analytics tell you. But it's not fair to do that with a Jalen Hurts or a Tua Tagovailoa, who played well last week with 4 touchdowns. He did have 2 picks. But let these guys develop and let these guys get enough games under their belt and have the skilled players around them and see what they're doing scheme-wise to really make a good, educated decision and what that future is going to look like.
The Tua situation, today I was in my classroom and there was a notification, trade is done.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there going, I cannot believe someone is going to not only invest in somebody who's got some situations going on in Sean Watson, but get rid of all that draft capital without ever having really a truly answer on whether or not Tua can do it.
Look at Miami. The Cardinals made you drafted Josh Rosen number 10. It didn't work out. You bring in Cliff Kingsbury. You get a chance to bring in Kyler Murray. Now Josh Rosen goes to Miami. They realize that's not a fit either. They bring Tua in. And now all of a sudden, again, you're saying, okay, well, it's like the Eagles. Wentz didn't work out. We're going to go with Jalen Hurts. Now all of a sudden we don't think Jalen Hurts is the right guy. Maybe it's Gardner Minshew. We just traded Joe Flacco. Now you go. It's like, man, this carousel and this quick thinking of let's just get rid of the guy after 10 games in the NFL or whatever it is. Like, we got to start seeing this thing through.
Is that just because we're old that we feel that way? Because that's how it was done in the old days.
Maybe, yeah.
These young bucks that we got to compete with in fantasy football, man. Damn.
I tell you what,
they get rid of shit real quick.
Yeah. The ageist, right?
Oh, yeah.
Get the guy that's 22, good draft capital, comes from an SEC program or a Power 5 conference. I'll take that guy over a guy that's been 5 years in the league that has proven to play at a high level. And I just don't agree with it. Give me the proven guy. There's only so many Jamar Chases and Michael and Kyle Pitts and these guys that come in the league. But give me the proven guy over the draft capital. And at what point does draft capital not become relevant, right? 2 to 3 years into a guy's NFL career, I think we can stop worrying about he's the number 1 draft pick. At this point, we have enough games to know if he's a good fit, what the long-term implications are, both in real football and, of course, that then translates into fantasy football.
But we got 6 minutes away from a guest. We were supposed to have a guest, but she recently, I think in the last month, moved to Italy, and obviously the time change. Her work schedule is not going to allow her to come on tonight. So we've got Bo from Ball Blast, If you know Bo, you know that dude knows everything about DFS. So we're looking forward to having him on tonight. But before we get into him, let's go ahead and talk a few things about last week.
Yeah.
One of the things that I wanted to hit on last week was the impressive win the Titans had over the Buffalo Bills. And then now, fast forward today, and now we're talking about an impressive win that they had over the Kansas City Chiefs. And just impressive is one thing, but to beat the Chiefs and limit the 3 points of offensive production, I mean, what's going on here? Are they that good, or we got some issues going on with Kansas City?
Well, I think there's a two-pronged approach here. I think, one, Tennessee, not to steal a quote from many years ago, you guys remember, but Dennis Green, but they are who we thought they were. Tennessee is now playing the way we saw them play at the end of last year, in the last couple of years, where now Tennessee has figured out Derrick Henry's Derrick Henry. I mean, talk about how unbelievable that guy is, but now you're starting to see A.J. Brown's going to get more involved the last couple of weeks. And so there's things that those teams are doing. So Tennessee now is playing the way we thought they would play at the beginning of the year. So Tennessee's a great team. Then you look at Kansas City, and they're 3-4. Patrick Mahomes is turning the ball over. That defense doesn't scare anybody. And so when you look at matchups, every week I'm looking at who's Kansas City playing. Who can I play off that offense? And those guys are fantasy relevant every week. Kansas City, man, the wheels are falling off. And, that's not a division. You can get off to a slow start and have an opportunity. There's some good teams, in that division. So I've got some real concerns about Kansas City. I would not be surprised if they don't make the playoffs, just based off of, if you look at their schedule. I know they got Denver twice, they got the Raiders twice, but they've also got some other tough matchups. They're going to go through a road raider. I can't remember the games off the top of my head, but they've got some tough games coming up over the next 5 games. So it's not a given that Kansas City gets into the playoffs the way that defense is playing and the way they're turning the ball over on offense.
As an A.J. Brown roster holder,
yeah,
holy smokes, it was nice to finally get something out of him. He played well, and he looked back. It looked like he did the last 2 years. So it was nice to see him finally come back. Hey, we finally got rid of all that buzz stuff.
Yeah.
Man, this light, now when I tell you I have internet issues, now you're in it. You can see it. It's here. It's real.
I just thought the crowd on that side of the field was going wild in the background. They were so excited. The two of us got together in the same house. We finally got a chance to meet each other face to face versus just doing the podcast. So I thought maybe that was just a crowd going crazy, but apparently it was the lighting.
Hey, so you brought up Jamar Chase.
Yeah.
So that brings me up to our next game we're going to talk about last week. Are the Bengals for real? I mean, here we are now. They're sitting here at 5-2. They just beat a Ravens team. I mean, and they didn't just beat them. They beat them 41-17. You got Jamar Chase, who just had 204 yards receiving.
Yeah.
I mean, that guy is doing everything we all thought, or I should say all the analysts who get paid lots and lots of money thought was going to do, and he's doing it. That's a fun team.
Jamar Chase is a special talent, and if you paid attention to the preseason rankings and consensus rankings and rookie rankings we were doing, Jamar Chase, for most of us, was a clear-cut wide receiver 1. And you saw in the preseason having issues with the drops and people talking about him not using NFL football. He was getting reps. Look, I didn't buy into any of that. Jamar Chase is a real deal. Man, he had a play last week against the Ravens.
Oh, a little slant
route, and he spun out of it. And here's what's so great about Jamar Chase. If you watch his college film, he does this on a consistent basis, week in and week out. His ability to make a catch in traffic, and while making the catch, he's already pivoting out of that route to avoid contact from the defense to get yards after the catch. He turns that into a slant route into a touchdown, making, I think it was 3 Ravens miss.
Yeah.
Because he's so great getting in and out of cuts. But yeah, I think the Cincinnati is absolutely for real. I think that defense is coming on strong. I think that offensively with what they have, Mixon's numbers, if you look at the advanced metrics, they're not great. His average yards per carry, his juke rate, there's some analytics you can look at, but he's a volume guy. He's going to give you consistent production. He might only get you 3 to 4 yards on a cloud of dust, but it sets up some of the other stuff that they do. And with CJ Uzomah now coming on.
Holy smokes. Did you see that game last week?
Yeah. I mean, he's come on the last few weeks. So I love watching Cincinnati play. And, with the NFL package I have every week, I mean, I'm always looking for Cincinnati games when they've got the ball. I love watching that offense and what they're doing.
It's pretty impressive, and it's a great indication, because if you remember, there was 2 sides of a coin this summer. It was all Penei Sewell or Jamar Chase. And I'm a firm believer you shore up that front before you do anything else. But at the same time, Jamar Chase is pretty damn special. And I think they made the right choice. If they did invest a second-round pick on an offensive lineman like they did, maybe you can be more critical of them. But Jamar's been everything Jamar is supposed to be. Going into I'm in a one quarterback home league. Same one forever. We talk about it pretty frequently.
Yeah.
And we have a group chat, and someone goes, "Who would you pick with a 101?" And I said it from day one: Jamar Chase. He lasted to 105, fell to a guy who has won our home league 2 years in a row, and now he's starting this guy because everyone else just let him fall. But I digress. Last game I want to mention on from last week.
Yeah.
And I only want to really mention it because I have not been shy in my frustration or in my distrust of one Carson Wentz. And I will say, as someone who's been very negative towards him, he showed a lot last week in that win over the 49ers. Now, early on, I think I might have there's my dogs going crazy. Early on in that game when he throws a pick going into the end zone, when he just kind of lobs it ahead, obviously that's not something you want to see your franchise quarterback doing. But later on, he kind of cleaned things up, and he looked pretty good. I think if I was in Indianapolis right now, I'm pessimistically optimistic about his future. He looked okay.
And you know me, I've been outspoken about Carson Wentz and going back.
That's why I bring it up. I hate the guy.
Where he was at in 2017 was potential MVP season before the injury, before the playoffs. Nick Foles takes him to the Super Bowl. I think the draft of Jalen Hurts affected his psyche. It was 6 inches between the ears, which is so pivotal for quarterbacks. But getting him back into an offense with a line of Jonathan Taylor, Pittman starting to play well, I felt like it was a good landing spot for Carson Wentz. He did have the injury, the Liz Frank injury in the preseason, and he had the ankle injury, I think it was week 2 or 3. He's now finally getting healthy. He's had now enough weeks under his belt in that Frank Reich offense. And this is now what I felt Carson Wentz was going to be. He doesn't have to be the guy, the Patrick Mahomes or the Dak Prescott or the Lamar Jackson, where he has to take it all on his shoulders. He just has to be a part. No, he just has to be a part of the offense, be a game manager, be smart, allow Jonathan Taylor to set up play action and let Frank Reich move the pocket a little bit. And I think now we're going to see Carson Wentz take on mid-season form, and I think that the Colts are going to be tough. I mean, it's going to be a challenge the rest of the year.
I was impressed, and at the same time, we talk about everyone's darling little fab pickup or late-round rookie pickup, and that's Elijah. Early on in that game, the Colts, San Francisco really fed him quite a bit, and I don't know why they went away from it. I mean, that guy looks pretty impressive. And whether it's Kyle Shanahan's system or whether or not it's just him being pretty damn good, as someone who's got a line of Elijah Mitchell, I'm pretty excited about him in the future.
Hey, you and me both. And I think in the draft, you look at, again, sometimes in fantasy we get too caught up in draft capital, and sometimes as analysts you've got to trust your process. And so when you saw a Trey Sermon get drafted coming out of Ohio State, people wanted to lean towards Trey Sermon, but if you look at their skill set and what they bring to that offense, Elijah Mitchell was a better fit in that zone run scheme that Kyle Shanahan runs. And we heard this quite a bit from some analysts, but I think he's doing now. He's surpassing expectations, but at the same time, we've seen enough reps that
he's just him.
You buy in and you go, man, if Kyle Shanahan would get away from this running back by committee philosophy and realize, hey, I've got somebody that brings something to the table.
And he's cheap.
Yeah, and he's cheap.
Yeah.
He's cheap. You got him on waivers. You got him later on in the draft, in your rookie draft. So, he's paying off. His ROI right now looks pretty good.
Well, you know what? First and foremost, it's been great to have you here. We didn't even get into this week's games, and there's some pretty good ones. Not to mention tomorrow night's game, which is probably the best Thursday night matchup I've ever seen with Green Bay at Arizona.
Yeah.
But I think it's time we bring on a guest, and we're very fortunate that when we lose a guest, we were able to just pick one up who's been absolutely killing it this year. Why don't you tell us all about this week's guest?
Man, hey, this guy I've been following for a long time, and I just got into the fantasy space about a year ago, and it's one of the first guys that I followed. And I ordered, first off, his hot box batch, which is a rub, and then the hot sauce, absolutely phenomenal. I've ordered it. I put it on my grill. I use the hot sauce all the time. It is absolutely fantastic. He's huge. No BS on the DFS. I mean, the guy really, the reality is he's absolutely outstanding with DFS. We're super excited to have Bo at Bo_McBigTime on the podcast. Bo, welcome to the show, man. Happy to have you, brother.
Thanks for having me, guys. Big ball blast crew over here, man. This is awesome.
It is awesome. What's weird is that we work for the same site. I don't think there's anyone who reads your stuff more than me.
Right.
And we've never actually had a conversation. So with that being said, it's great to finally meet you, Bo.
Yeah, likewise. It's exciting to see who's picking at my work.
Yeah.
Well, hey, and real quick, just so you know, we talked about, hey, who do we want to have on the show? Who can we bring on? I'm like, well, how many Cowboy fans do you know? So we figured this would be a great time to bring you on, man. So we could just relish in the Dallas Cowboys season thus far, man.
Let's hope it keeps them going. They look really good. I mean, be cautiously optimistic, as you know.
That's perfectly said. I agree.
Well, let's get into it. So one of the things your space in this place is one where obviously DFS is your go-to. I joined Twitter about a year and a half ago, and pretty quick early on, I don't know if it was, I want to say it's your good buddy, Number Nimbles. He threw out a tweet saying there's some new league. I'm looking for people to join, and I'm being new to the game. My man, please pick me. And so I've had a great opportunity to play in 3 different leagues with Scott over the last year. But you and Scott have a great relationship, and why don't you talk about how you kind of really got started in this place?
I mean, it kind of starts back with Scott. I've been on Twitter since 2012 officially, but I really wasn't paying attention to the app at all until 2019. And I just basically got on there to follow fantasy football analysts that I knew from TV or from certain podcasts that were popular. Like, of course, the ESPN guys. And then I never heard of the footballers. I'd never heard of any of these internet famous fantasy football gurus, but I knew the ESPN guys. I knew the NFL Network guys. And I just wanted to follow them and see what they were saying. And then it just like wildfire, you start to follow more and more accounts. And by a few months in, I was following a couple thousand accounts. And then I had a few hundred followers that followed me back, probably just out of just being nice. But I've been a long time fantasy football player. I've been playing DFS football since 2017, pretty successfully. And I've been around the game of football my entire life. Like, I've been intimately involved in the game of football my entire life through coaching and stat keeping and writing columns for the local paper about details of the game in case you missed it. Because the whole town would show up for a high school football game, but every once in a while somebody wouldn't show up and they'd have to read the paper column to figure out what happened.
That's funny that you say that, because my life in football away from coach, it's weird. I have parallels to you in the sense that I was a longtime coach at the high school level, but I've also been a prep editor at a local paper. So I hear what you're saying. I mean, high school sports is everything. And you coming from the Sacramento area, I'm sure you've watched Grant. I'm sure you watched Folsom. I'm sure you've seen, all the, right. So
all these great schools. I mean, you can go even down to Stockton, Manteca area. That's some great schools. You go west to the Bay Area. There's some amazing schools like Mater Dei and all these other ones that are producing NFL talent every single year. But at the same time, I'm from farther north. I'm from the same area as Aaron Rodgers. And so we played against Aaron Rodgers' Pleasant Valley team a couple times, and we beat him one time because we had a great running attack. So we kept him off the field. We ran for 400 yards and 4 rushing touchdowns against him, and he had himself a game, but he couldn't keep up because he was barely on the field. But that's that little cat and mouse game you play to beat teams that are more talented than you, and that knowledge of football for me just carried into the fantasy part of it, because I'm a numbers guy. I love math. I'm good at math, but for me,
Yeah.
it was always about coming back to the nuances of the game itself. And that's how I play fantasy, is like I know the X's and O's better than I know the stats. And so I want to bring that nuance into how I play and how I approach my main slates, how I approach my showdown blaster slates. Those are I'm more thinking about how the game's going to flow, what kind of attacks each team's going to have for the cat and mouse aspect of it. And I think you can read that in my articles, is I'm trying to find those little edges within the game plans for each side that will kind of tell the story of how the game's going to go.
One of the things that I really sold Kate on in hiring me is that I convinced her that I was your guys' audience. I have, because of my background in journalism, I have the great skill in the editorial work. So I can edit anything. I'd much rather edit football content. That's why I'm here and not in some medical website. But I digress. So what I bring with that is that brings questions to, if I'm your audience, I need you to tell me how to use your content. So here we go. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's ready. I can tell him. He's got game face on.
Yeah. Well, no, he's looking at his phone, which you and we're all doing the same thing.
I live on this.
Your piece today, which heck, I honest to God thought today was Thursday, if you can believe it. So you sent your you sent your Thursday night DFS picks already this morning. I edited it. I already threw it out there. I don't even know if you know it's on there. Yeah. Nobody seemed to care. I made the mistake thinking today was Thursday, but that's great for the readers. But with that being said, when I read it in our Discord chat, I even asked, do we have DFS in California? And Brandon looked, and Brandon goes, yeah, of course we do. And I was like, oh shit, because this is trouble. Because if I got references like you and other people that write for our website, obviously, I want to, jump in the pool. So with that being said, how do I use your content that you provide to our readers? So with that, I mean, like when you tell me your best showdown captain picks, or you tell me my week 8 DFS complimentary picks, or from the jar change, or whatever it may be, how do I take what you're giving me and put together a lineup?
I mean, I leave it open-ended like that because there is a lot of art form to building your own lineup. Just like with one of our winners early on a couple of weeks ago, he just signed up, won a big jackpot, basically took down a big tournament but from the information from my article. But he built a lineup that was one player different from mine. And he ended up winning $8,000 and I won $600. So there's a huge difference there. Even with the same information, you can derive multiple different iterations of it. It's like I'm giving you a keychain full of keys, and you still have to put the right key in the right lock and at the right time. And so that's really what I see myself as, is just giving you all the information to give you an edge over somebody else who might not read it, who's going to be playing the guys that they recognize. They're going to recognize a lot of names, especially this Thursday night with 2 marquee teams that have a lot of great players on them. This is the kind of slate, though, that can get people into trouble. If they're just picking popular guys, then they're going to be left, who do I fill in these value spots? Because once I plug in Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins and Aaron Rodgers, I don't have any money left. What do I do now?
Well, I think that's a neat thing. And, of course, DFS just became legal in Arizona, so I'm finally able to play where, last year it was funny. I had a guy in Pennsylvania, and I don't care, I'll share it, but I had a guy in Pennsylvania where it was legal, and I'd be like, I'm the football guy. I'm the one that reads it all and keeps track of stats and all that stuff, and he's just like the weekend warrior. So I'll send him my lineups. He'll put it in through Pennsylvania, and then we'll play. Well, now it's legal. So now I'm like, hey, this is awesome. I can finally build my own.
I don't need you anymore, buddy.
I know, right? So what's really cool about that is I think you just hit the nail on the head. When I first started doing DFS, I was reaching out to Chris Robin and other people, and I started soaking up as many articles as I could. Your name came up a bunch of times, and I'm like, oh, my God, I follow him. Yeah, of course I'm going to read his stuff. But what's really neat is, like you said, you can look at the over-under and look at the total points, and I think everybody wants to gravitate to that game. And you can take the Arizona Cardinals, prime example. Yeah, Kyler Murray, D-Hop, Christian Kirk has become relevant. Rondale Moore, is it his week? What is the defense doing? What's the scheme? Where do they struggle? How do I create matchup, advantages? And how do I get the house into my favor? But it's not necessarily picking the highest over-under game. It's saying, okay, I can take a player or two from that, but where do I find my complementary players from games that maybe people wouldn't think of? So my roster is going to stand out. And I think that's the great thing about people just getting into DFS like me, is having an understanding of that and using resources like you and Chris Robin and guys and Scott, Nimble with Numbers, and what you guys put out. And just like, dude, those sites pay for it, like your guy did. We were going to bring it up. You stole our thunder a little bit, but yeah, the guy, he was telling me a story about, he was showing me the tweet about the guy that won the 8,000. That's a great thing about DFS is there is an art to it. There is a science to it. It's not just give me the most popular players and let me just throw a couple complimentary players in there and take a shot at it. There's a fine art to putting a lineup together for sure.
For sure. I mean, I've been fortunate to win a couple tournaments over the years, but this year I still haven't won one, but my readers have won tournaments. And so I'm like happy in one way. I'm like, oh, I'm so close. Like I haven't quite popped the exact combination yet, but it's only been 7 weeks. I mean, I feel confident that as close as I'm coming, as sharp as I have gotten lately, the last couple of weeks, that it's just a matter of time. And our readers, our subscribers are going to keep winning because if I'm getting sharper, they are too.
Well, let's get into that part of it. So you say that you're getting closer. What are you doing? What do you wake up on a Monday, or you wake up on Tuesday, the last week's slates are all over, and now it's time to get to work. Tell me what that work entails.
All 22. I get the film fired up, and basically I'm just looking for confirmation. I watch the Red Zone for entertainment purposes on Sunday. Of course, I watch all the primetime games, and I kind of know how each team thinks. Like in the off season, all that prep work is like, okay, what does this coach want to do? Like I've been right about a lot of coaches. I've been wrong about a couple of coaches. Like I thought Nick Sirianni would have more of a clue about how to run an NFL offense because he's been doing it as a coordinator. But in Philly, he looks terrible. And so we're saying, okay, why is his game plan not working? Well, it's because he's coming in unprepared. And so you have these coaches that come in prepared with their game plan installed for a particular opponent. Bill Belichick's a perfect example. The average fantasy player is going to be like, man, I have no idea which running back is Bill going to feature this week. You never know. But if you watch and you pay attention and you look at what his opponent does, what his opponent does well is what Bill's going to he's going to avoid that. And what the opponent is weak at, he's going to attack it full bore. He's 100% going to attack your weakest thing. And so, like for example, if you have a coach that is like that with Bill Belichick, he's more predictable. I like to go in and get inside the coach's head and say, okay, how is he going to attack? And some of these younger coaches don't attack. They try to outsmart and they try to gimmick their way into yards and touchdowns. And it doesn't work in the NFL. It might work for a game or two, but once it's on film, if I can see it, these coaches definitely see it. And then the players see it, and the good players, the smart players, the team captains, they're going to be honing in. They're going to get their whole unit ready for that. And that's what we're seeing is that we're getting sharper because the teams are getting sharper. We're getting everything on film the same way the other teams are, and it's an advantage to us just like it is an opposing coach.
Is there anything more frustrating than a barking dog at a podcast? It freaking happens.
I'm surprised mine hasn't yet.
Hey, mine's done it too. So hey.
Yeah, well, this is mine.
Mine's laying here ready to go. She's ready for anybody to pass by.
I got two bopping off. Okay, so with that being said, you got that aspect, the DFS, but you're also playing fantasy. Do you rely strictly on your content, or are you because there's almost so much time in the day. And so if you're going to be someone who claims to be an expert, and if I'm paying for Bo, I'm saying the guy's an expert. Would you agree with that? Okay, so
I don't know. Expert's such a strong word because
well, certainly better than 90%.
Expert implies. I mean, some people might consider an expert just the person who knows more than the average person, and somebody who the average person can look up to. But I mean,
Are
for
you
me,
groundwork in
Yeah.
aspect?
I still have people I follow for getting more information quickly. Like you said, there's not enough time in the day to follow everybody and read all their stuff and derive what you can from it. I can't squeeze the juice out of the lemon that well. But I do rely on a lot on what my own eyes tell me, what my own experience and training tells me. But then I have friends that I know are really sharp that I rely on to confirm what I'm seeing. Like I'll ask them and be like, "Hey, do you see this too, or am I crazy?" And a lot of these guys, like Chris Robin, you mentioned, nimble with numbers. A lot of these guys that they know what they're looking for, they know what they're looking at, and they might disagree with me. It happens all the time, but a lot of times we might even look at each other and go, you know what? It's actually this, and we'll meet in the middle and be like, hey, this is what we're looking for.
You bring up
I don't know if that clarifies anything, but yes, I do follow other people for advice, even though I'm quote unquote an expert, which I'm still a little bit leery about that title.
No, and I think you bring up a great point. I think us being former coaches and players, and it's film study is a big part of, I know, my process and just trusting that process. But I think what's really neat about what you said is that speaks to me. So we could probably talk to you all day about football, but is understanding what schematically defenses are doing and going into a specific matchup and saying, hey, I know how this team is going to coach. And I'll bring up the Dallas Cowboys game last week. Is you saw CeeDee Lamb go for 140, a couple touchdowns, and do what he did with the game winner in overtime. You saw them roll coverage to Amari Cooper and then load up the box to stop Zeke. So in Dallas's offense, because there's so many great skill players, pick your poison. And that week, it was like, CeeDee Lamb's the guy we're not going to concentrate on. We're going to leave him in one-on-one matchups, or we're going to play zone coverage to that side and try to bracket him, and he tore it up. And so I think that's a great part about DFS and fantasy football is understanding when you're trying to figure out who do I play this week when there's not a bye week and everybody's available, who do I play? When you've got a stack lineup, the art is, hey, I've got a stack lineup. However I got there, it doesn't matter. How do I pick and choose which players I want to play in a given week? And I think that's and that's really what the coach approach is all about, is bringing real football into fantasy football and understanding what those matchups are, what to watch for in film, or what analysts to trust with that breakdown. So talk through that a little bit and how you take a look at a lineup and say, hey, this one, like I just talked about Dallas, why I felt like CeeDee Lamb is going to be a great person to get, who to play last week. And of course it panned out, but talk to us a little bit about how you set that process up in terms of what players in DFS you're going to pick that maybe the consensus isn't necessarily rolling with, if that makes sense.
And yes, DFS is very simply picking the players who are going to score the most points per salary dollar. I mean, if you break it down like that, you're like, oh, that's easy. Just find the guy who's going to score the most points per dollar and fit them all together and score a bunch of points and win the tournament, right? I mean, you could very easily make a good living if you were good at that, of finding the players who are going to score the most points at their salary. And sometimes it is that easy. Sometimes that it jumps off the page at you. And other times you have to dig a little deeper to find those guys. Like last week, I nailed my running, or 2 weeks ago, I nailed my running back picks. I had Darrell Henderson and Joe Mixon. Like I was locked in, no matter what the format was. I was like, Henderson and Mixon are in every lineup, and I'm going to build around those guys because I saw their volume potential is steady. I was like, there's no way, unless they get hurt early in the game, that they're not going to get 20 touches. And then I look at, okay, the Bengals, for example, who are they pushing against? That this is a zone running team. A lot of these running attacks are wide zone schemes these days. So if you have a big plotting, not very athletic or quick defensive line, or a linebacking core that gets sucked up inside pretty easily, Joe Mixon's going to have himself a day. Let's see, I told you.
Right on cue. There it is. I love it.
But that's Rosie.
No, and hey, that makes sense. I think that's what we're all trying to do, as far as whether you're an experienced DFS player or even simply fantasy, is just being able to say, hey, it's nice because I'm starting to get a lot more DMs now every week and saying, hey, who do you like here? Who would you put in your lineup? And it's hard sometimes to explain to them based on what we're seeing the defensive do. Like I can go on and read player profiler and look at analytics and look at the defense and what they're doing, but it's also understanding who the opponent was. Like, and I'll give you an example. So Carolina, after 3 weeks before they played Dallas, was the #1 defense in the NFL. But you look at who they played against, the type of scheme, and you said, okay, it's a different deal going against the Dallas Cowboys. And I was very outspoken, and I remember watching a podcast, and it was showing what they do with their one technique and what they do against the pass and how they're able to be so well against the run game. It's like, hey, totally different deal. And, of course, what did Dallas do? They ran for over 200 yards, and they absolutely obliterated them. And Carolina's been reeling ever since. So there's so much more to it in the football and fantasy space of breaking down what they're doing.
Anytime you can freaking –
It's Bo, man. I got to tie the Cowboys in.
Anytime you can bring up the Cowboys, that's all I got to freaking hear.
But the Cowboys are a great example of what we're talking about. They're the team that's put multiple defenses on tape now. They put the Panthers on tape where, okay, Panthers looked really good the first 3 weeks, like you said. But what beat them? It was getting punched in the mouth. Like you got the Cowboys run the same zone run scheme, except their offensive line just mauls people. And of course, they can play it the other way, like they did against Tampa Bay, where you're like, okay, our offensive line and their defensive line are basically neutral. We're not going to run the ball on them. We're not even going to try because that's not how you beat the Bucs. You beat the Bucs by chucking the ball around the yard and hoping to outscore them. It didn't work out, but it could have if Zerline made a couple kicks. We might be talking about an undefeated Cowboys team. But at the same time, this is a Cowboys offense that is showing the rest of the league how to beat these tougher defenses. And so it might not work out the same way the rest of the year because at the same time we're figuring out, okay, what is Kellen Moore doing? These other coaches that are smart, like you saw Bill Belichick, him and Brandon Staley did a great job of modeling up.
Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, these guys are freaking great offensive players.
But I think the point
what I'm saying is at the same time, those Chargers and the Patriots did a great job of neutralizing it because they saw what Kellen Moore was doing on tape. That's the cat and mouse game is that, yes, the Cowboys are exposing weaknesses of great defenses, but those great defenses are also saying, okay, how do we slow the Cowboys down? How do we beat the Cowboys? Well, you have to keep them under 30 points to have a chance because their defense is going to pin their ears back in the second half and cause a lot of turnovers. But if you can get out ahead of them, I don't know that the Cowboys are the type of team that can come back too easily because Dak Prescott is more of he's probably the best game manager. He's not that comeback type player. He's not a Tony Romo where it's like, okay, Tony, our defense sucks. We need you to come back. Dak Prescott's not that guy. He's a good quarterback and he can come back, but he's not that guy. He's a guy that's not going to make mistakes. He's going to be the guy that makes smart throws and methodically moves the ball down the field and throws touchdown passes, but he's not Aaron Rodgers. He's not going to be like, hey, we got 2 minutes left, no timeouts, go and win us the game. I don't know that Dak's that guy yet. He might be down the road, but I don't know if he's there yet.
I think that's a misconception sometimes, not that, what you're saying, but there's a misconception in the fantasy industry about there's got to be a lot of input in terms of if you can take a quarterback who's been in the same system with the same offensive coordinator for 2 to 3 years, you can expect a jump. And if the weapons are there on the offensive side of the ball, whether it's Cincinnati, whether it's Dallas, whether it's Aaron Rodgers when Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon and what they do with that offensive line when Bakhtiari's healthy, you have to look at the scheme, and there's certain teams you can say, hey, these guys are going to be fantasy relevant for years to come, as long like Travis Kelce, Devontae Adams. A lot of agists would say, I don't have him #1 on my rankings because of his age. If I can project 3 years out, which is my cap in fantasy, and I can say, hey, for the next 3 years, this guy has tight end 1 or wide receiver 1 or RB1 upside in that scheme with that offensive coordinator in that system, I'll build rosters around that all day long. And so I think that's something that a lot of people that are starting in fantasy football are starting to play in tougher leagues with analysts that are more seasoned miss the boat on because they don't take all that stuff into consideration.
Yeah, and they overestimate the cliff dropping off. Like the perfect example, of course, is Derrick Henry. 27-year-old running back. Historically, you should have already sold him a year ago. If you're going by the age consensus, like 26-year-old running backs,
I'm dying with him now.
And Derrick Henry's just not human. So he's an outlier, of course. You're not selling Derrick Henry unless you already did, and you're kicking yourself because he's going to be elite until his legs give out, which, I mean, I don't know how anybody's going to slow him down because he seems to just keep getting stronger. This is
what was the run he had last week or the week before where he was 21 point something miles an hour? And it was the fastest run of his, not only of this season, but of his career.
He split 2 DBs.
It's unbelievable. When he gets in the open field, it reminds me of Jerry Rice's receiver. Only ran a 4.7 at the combine, but you never saw the guy get caught from behind. You look at Derrick Henry, the size and mass of this dude. But, dude, if he gets out in the open field, you're not catching him. Like, he's gone.
Right, and that's the thing is he doesn't run a 4.4, but his top end speed is it's
good enough.
Yeah,
it's good enough.
If you hit 21 something miles an hour, nobody's catching you from behind. It might take him an extra 2 steps to get to that full speed. From, let's say, Tyreek Hill. Those 4.2, 4.3 guys, they just get to full speed faster. That's the difference. The top speed's still the same, and Derrick Henry at top speed is going to pull away from everybody else on that field. And even if the guy does catch him from behind, they're not bringing him down because he's massive.
Yeah.
All right, Bo, we're going to move on to something else.
Okay.
I am the cook in my house. And I've always been one. And I've been the cook in my house because up until the last 4 years, I've been a single parent for 16 years. And I bring that up because I always look for something that would take a long time to cook. Because when you're a single parent, I wanted space. I've got 11 kids. I didn't want them all over me.
Leave me alone.
Yes, I just wanted to work in my art in cooking. And you are someone with all your talk about different types of hot sauces you make. You're obviously someone who spends a lot of time in it. So tell me where that love came from.
I mean, ever since I was tall enough to see over the countertop, I was helping my grandpa and grandma in the kitchen. And they made everything old school. Like my grandparents in their 70s were pressure cooking whole chickens and breaking things down instead of, like, we didn't have anything prepackaged. It was all just like my grandma had arthritis in her fingers are crooked, and she's still mashing her own refried beans from scratch. And it's like, okay, it's like, everybody in the family is like, hey, why don't you just do it this way? It's gonna be so much easier. And it's like, it doesn't taste right. Why would I do that? And so it was always amazing. And so I grew up with amazing food. And so, I mean, just the natural course of things is, as I got older, I kind of moved away from the kitchen. I didn't really cook through college or anything. But when I got into a relationship at the end of college and then eventually got married, it was like, this was fun for me. It was a hobby that was fun for me because I could go back to my childhood and all the things that I had witnessed. I don't know if I learned them, but it came naturally to me to be curious and to do things creatively. And that was the fun part, was trying to figure out how to recreate some of these things, like my grandma's spaghetti sauce. Like I just now mastered it this year. It took me 10 years to duplicate it. And I had brought her some, and I was like, hey, I finally figured out what your secret ingredient was. Yeah. And she tasted it. She goes, yeah, I think you found it.
All right, there you go.
Hearing my grandma tell me that at 84 years old, that her grandson had finally duplicated her spaghetti sauce without even asking for the recipe, she was tickled pink. Like she was. I don't know if she was proud or afraid that who told you?
I cook all the time, and I was very fortunate that I've got I'm not bashful in saying that I have 11 children. And so my kids, 4 of them.
I'm sorry, what?
I have 11 children.
So I had a bunch of
them.
I've seen the pictures.
Yeah, he has. He lives in our home.
It is true.
He's in our home. So aside from that, 4 of my children came home last weekend, and I go, what do you want me to make this weekend? And the first thing they said was, I make an Italian meatball dish that I learned from somebody, and I made it and so forth, and they were happy as could be. But reaching out to the person who gave me the recipe, tell me how to make it, they were absolutely thrilled. So I get what you say when you say your grandmother was like, okay, this guy got it.
Yeah. And I never asked her because I was always making it my own way for so long. And
Right.
then I was like, you know what? The best spaghetti I ever had was grandma's spaghetti.
Yeah.
And so I just started playing around with it, and I played around with it for years. I'm telling you, 10 years that it wasn't quite right. And I was missing one ingredient, and then I finally figured out what it was, and the rest is history.
What was it? What's the one? You just got to give us one ingredient. What did you miss?
Brown sugar.
It was green bell pepper.
The old green pepper. God bless.
It's
so this guy right here has actually had your hot sauce. So I want him to give me a critique of it.
Oh, it's fantastic. Like I'm out, so I got to order some more, by the way. I just ran out, so I'm going to be ordering some more. And the rub, the hot box rub, is absolutely fantastic. But it's funny you bring up spaghetti sauce. My wife's Italian, so I always joke around when people say, "Hey, how long you been married?" I'm like 40 pounds. Because she flat out can cook. So I'm not the cook in the family. Matter of fact, and I like to think I can grill, but she takes it over. And I'm like the guy, I'm like, dude, I'm supposed to be the one grilling. She's like, I got it. But
get out of the way.
Her spaghetti sauce. So it'd be funny to do like a cook-off between her spaghetti sauce, yours.
Yes.
She just made spaghetti with meatballs. It's what she's known for. And like you, it's a very similar story. She figured out the family recipe on her own. I don't know how long it took her to figure it out, but she did. But it's the best thing in the world that she makes. So every time she's like, homemade, I can't think of the word. Goddamn, chicken pot pie is outstanding. But it'd be really cool to do like a cook-off or whatever you want to call it for spaghetti sauce, because I'll eat that stuff all day long, man.
Yeah, me too. I pretty much eat half of it with the spoon while I'm testing it.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Hey, Bo, man, we can't thank you enough. I reached out to you in the last minute. You came on, and you're certainly the type of guest that we want to come on. So thank you so much for coming here tonight.
It was I had a lot of fun. You guys are awesome. Keep limiting the cut downs in my articles. I love it.
Awesome. I just want to learn how to do it, though. Here's the thing I do. I'm going, great. Now, how do I actually put on a lineup through this is what I end up saying. But
well, he just gave you the secret recipe. It's like take everything it tells you and just figure out which guy you got to switch out.
Yeah, right. Whatever.
Yeah, you win $8,000.
Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, hey, Bo, send me your lineup this week. That's what I'll end up doing.
Yeah, there you go.
I could do that.
Hey, we appreciate you being on, man. That was awesome. We could talk all night long with you, brother.
Yep, it's been great. Have a great night, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much. Hey, everybody else, we'll see you next week. Thank you so much. Coach, it was great to have you in my home.
Man, it was awesome, man. I appreciate the hospitality, brother.
All right.
Have the bourbon ready to go.